mixer probably has at least 4.
That's interesting because as I've looked at some have 4, some have, and yet when I get down into them looking in the bottom, it's like, okay, so the things at the bottom, all the little knobs aren't the same for all 4 or 6 channels, whatever, with many of them.
Well, that's
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest. It's not a lie, but I feel like it's not a truth either. The way they count these mixers is they'll say 16 channels, and then
Mm-hmm.
you count, and you're like, but I only see 8 mic sockets. How does that work? Well, because you got a couple stereo channels, and those are technically 2 each, so that's 4. And then, well, I got an AES, or I got a USB, and that's another couple, and I'm kind of like, okay, I suppose technically it's 16, but I agree. I feel like that's a little bit of a kind of gets me lathered up. And
Yeah.
my the consoles I use, for example, one of the consoles I love to use the most has only XLRs. It has no other inputs whatsoever. Because basically in the pro touring world, everything gets sent that way eventually, through a direct box or something. And it has 96 of them. But, when they say 96, they mean 96. I get 96.
And
But
that's 96 in those big boards. It's literally all the controls and all the capability of channel 1 is the same as it is on 96.
every single one. Yep, every single one.
And it can,
Sometimes you run into limitations with memory, like, maybe not every channel can have some of the more advanced processing, like multi-band compression or dynamic EQ, or some things that, you wouldn't need 96 of anyway.
okay.
Where they say, okay, you maybe don't have enough memory to do, but that, yeah, that otherwise, oh yeah, it's all the same, 96 across, and now most of those, bridges have been crossed too, where you do have those things. But anyway, we're getting way off topic.
No, no,
So
but I think those are good things to point out because even the smaller boards have capabilities on maybe mic channel 1 and 2, or maybe even just channel 1 that they may not have on channels 2, 3, and 4.
correct.
It can be
Yeah,
there.
your stereo channels certainly will behave differently. And that's not to say that stereo channels are bad. In fact, I've got some pretty little drawings we'll look at after a bit that show you why the stereo channels are very useful in the scenario we're talking about right now, where a DJ would want to use a couple mic preamps, 2, 4, whatever. Most DJs aren't typically using more than 4 mics,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's if you're doing karaoke, maybe, you're using a few more, ceremony work, but would be a pretty extraordinary scenario where a DJ is regularly using more than 4 mics. But in that case, you still could get a small mixer that has 6 or 8 mic
Sure.
preamps. No biggie.
Mm-hmm. Is the controls and such, are they fairly universal as far as when we were talking about the 96 channel board? There's a lot of capability with compression and gates and whatever. To some of that capability, are those in some of those smaller boards also?
Yes, to a degree. Typically, we find things like push button compression where it's either in or out. You don't have a lot of ability to adjust things like, attack or, threshold or knee or any of those kinds of things. It's either in or out, and you get it or don't get it. You typically don't find more advanced dynamics like gate, things like that. Not in these small analog boards, but there are small digital boards that have all of these things built in, and it's incredible the level of processing capability now at the fingertips of DJs. So, yeah, we could take a look at things like the UI series or the Digital Live 16, or which I love, or the Touch Mix, or any of these little inexpensive digital boards. Persona Studio Live series. They've got their one rack U chassis, that sort of thing. So yes and no is the answer. In your small, 100, $200 analog boards, you're probably not going to find anything really like that. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
find basic 3-band EQ, maybe a sweepable mid, high pass filter, which high pass everything, folks. High pass everything. I've been saying for years I'm going to make a T-shirt that says that. I just haven't got around to it. Anyway, eventually. But yeah, pretty much they all. Once we strip away some of those things, they pretty much all do the same thing, and they all do it pretty much the same. You could look at one and look at another, and it's going to be fairly translatable pretty quick. You can say,
Mm-hmm.
well, I can use this board, I can use this board. It gets a little bit more nuanced when you get into the bigger boards. They've got more features under the hood. Maybe you have to go through some menus or layers to find the thing you're looking for. But at the end of the day, basically gates are gates and compression's compression and preamps are, I know there's some audio purists that are going, no, but they don't sound the same.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. That's what I'm talking about, you know?
For the typical mobile DJ, I mean, some of that functionality is nice to have, and once you get comfortable with it, it can make a difference. But it's not a game changer, or I shouldn't say a deal
I think
breaker.
it can be a game changer to have those things, but yeah.
But it isn't something that if you don't have that, you're like, oh my gosh, thought I was doing so well, and then I don't have this capability.
Well, yes, that's true. I will say, once you've had it, it's hard not to.
Okay.
I will say that I find myself missing those things when I work on smaller boards and things, corporate AV, things that don't have it. I'm like, oh, if I only had.
I had this. I want to send this mix to this, and I can't. Oh.
That's really, yeah. Because you know what you could have, but I think too, having more than you do now is still an improvement. Getting a small analog board that gives you some of those additional capabilities you currently don't have with your controller is still a step in the right direction. And whether or not you need those things, since you've never missed them, it's hard to say. And I think situationally, too, there's a time and a place where you can, maybe you want it, but you don't need it. You'll survive. I just had a good friend over the other day who had brought over a small digital board that I had sold him, and he brought it over, and we had it out on my kitchen table, and we went through a few things, and he reported back just how much that had helped his first gig. He said, "Oh my gosh, it helped a bunch," and that was rewarding for me, to know that. But now that he has those tools, it'll be hard not to use them,
And just to kind of wrap that area up, is it kind of related it to we were talking to another DJ, and he's like, yeah, I don't use any of that type of stuff on I just basically run everything and flat and whatever, all knobs, compression and such. And it's like, it's it's like a hammer. The hammer's got the claw part, and it's got the head of the hammer. And if you're not using some of that stuff, you can function, your hammer can function but there's that other side. And once you start using the claw side of it to do parts of it, you find out that, wow, this is a multi-purpose tool that can do a lot of different things. And to a point, and they're not wanting to utilize some of the functionality, that's fine, and it'll work, but you're kind of missing out.
Yeah, I think the first time you pull a nail with the claw, and the second time you try to do it without one, you're going to say, man, this was a lot easier with the claw.
Exactly. Yeah, my players just isn't doing it. I don't
I know there's a tool for this that makes my life easier. And
if I only could remember what it was. I don't know.
I have probably a good story. It's probably too long to tell for the show, but it's about my niece's wedding where I got voluntold to run sound, and the church had a large old analog desk, and I wasn't happy that I was stuck working while everybody else was enjoying the wedding. But two, I was missing a lot of these things. I'm like, if only.
Where's the?
Yeah. And one of the vocalists that was singing really needed some reverb, and probably a delay would have helped too. And I'm like, I could just shine that vocal right up. I'm like, if I only had. And so those are the things that are going through my head the whole time this wedding's happening. I'm like, if I only had this and that. And
then afterwards, everyone's like, it was such a beautiful wedding. Did you see it? It's like, the board. I needed buttons, more buttons.
You're not far off, John. You're not far off. I'm slamming punch and wedding cake, just trying to drown my sorrows
at the frustration. So we need to start looking at some pictures. We haven't looked at pictures for a while, and it's time.
All right. Let's see. Which picture should we look at? Should we look at routing some things from DJ controller into
I think so. I think the idea of taking that control. Well, let's talk about which would be the best way to handle this. Is because I've had people mention that they would take their little mixer and they would put the microphones into that for their karaoke, and they would run that into the controller, mic input, and then to the speakers. My thought is that that's probably not the best way to do it.
Well, I think this is an area of subjectivity. I'm inclined to agree with you. I think that, for one thing, the analog board has more I/O capability, so we're kind of going backwards here. We would be better served, I think, by sending everything into the small mixer and then out to the speakers, because then we can use that sub on aux, and then we have those kinds of things going on. But there might be a reason that somebody wants to go the other way, and
Can we
I
say
don't
it's
think
just
I
a
would.
bad reason and just, saying it's naughty?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going
Okay,
to say
well,
they're
but
wrong.
I could.
You could,
Because I
yeah.
could, technically my name's not on a show. So if I go and say it's naughty and Ben
Look, I already
says,
got in trouble with my wife. I'm not getting in trouble with our viewers too. Okay,
that's
that's it.
exactly. So I'm still good. No one's come up behind me, and I better make sure. Nope, no one's
Yeah,
back.
take a look because Lori's right behind you.
No
All right,
one's
yes.
back here. I am good. So the preferred method we're going to state for tonight's show unofficially is controller into our little board and then to our speakers in whatever fashion we need to go to our speakers. That part we're not going to worry about right now. So
That's how I would do it.
how would you recommend then for us to start, making these connections? What would be the best way?
Well, I think I'm gonna do that with a drawing.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we can. We're gonna start with.
And if they don't do it
this.
right, can we do like a flaming wire that isn't working anymore because it's burned up and they did it wrong?
You know, it's funny. I actually thought about a fire reference, and I'll tell you about it in a second because I was actually trying to illustrate a point. But that was when I was thinking about mic versus line voltage, and
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If we can dive into that in a little bit,
We will.
But
We definitely will.
I was actually. It's amazing what you can find on the internet. I was actually doing internet searches for audio flamethrower, you know, mixing board on fire. I was really disappointed. I thought I would find more mixing boards on fire, but I didn't
Not
find
so
that
much.
many.
Not so
So,
much.
anyway, what we can see here is this is we'll call it, a basic small format analog console. Now, some of you might say, well, it looks kind of big to me. Okay, but categorically speaking, it's a small format desk. And when we get smaller, we just take away some of these things, but the functionality remains pretty much the same. This is, and as you said, John, to your point, where they kind of lie, but they don't lie. This is a 12-channel board, but yet we'll notice that it actually has channels up to 14, but it only has 8 mic preamps. So, I mean, technically, I guess it is 12 channels if you count them, but
Sure.
I digress. All right, so anyway, what we can see here.
First off, for just to kind of now, as I'm looking down the channels, I see, we've got some. You've got your XLR at the top, then you have the 1/4 inch, but then I've got like number 3 and 4 that don't have there's a difference there in 3 and 4 compared to 1 and 2 when it came to that. And then as we look down, I see that there's little gray buttons, but a little bit below that is also inconsistent across there. So we are seeing in those channels a lot of variety in control capability.
Yeah, are you talking about these buttons
Yeah.
here? So the buttons on the left correspond to, basically we've got instrument inputs on this thing where it in essence has a high Z input, sort of has a built-in direct box. All of these channels have this high pass filter, which again, high pass everything, right? That's going to, well, not everything, not your music, but this is going to knock out, I think it's probably 100 hertz. So it's going to knock out 100 hertz and below out of your microphones. Definitely something you should do. And what we can see the difference when we get over here is we've got these 8 mic preamps, but then starting, here we've got stereo channels. So these are technically also stereo channels. So they've got 2 inputs per channel.
Sure.
And that's how that channel count gets a little funky. And anyway, our mic preamps are balanced mic level. Our line inputs here, our stereo inputs are line level stereo inputs. And so what we can see I've done is I've brought my mics, wired and wireless, into my mic preamps. I've got my preamp gain control here, so on and so forth. My EQ section in here.
Yeah.
I drew that box a little bit big. My aux sends down here. My pan here. Oh, that's probably not the pan. Sorry,
There you go.
my screen's probably a little smaller than yours. Anyway, boy, if I could read it, that'd be great. Anyway, so all the things that I might want to use on my microphone, there, and then I've taken this unbalanced line level stereo audio out of the RCA outputs on my mixing board, and I have brought them into the 1/4 inch unbalanced line level stereo inputs. Now, 2 questions you're probably thinking. One,
Yes.
why didn't I use the RCAs when they're sitting right there? And you certainly could. in this case, the reason I didn't is because this channel also has Bluetooth, and I wanted to save that so I could,
If you need it. Yeah, makes sense.
so I was like, well, electrically speaking, RCA, quarter-inch, line level, same. This gives me the ability to save that channel for something else in the future. Never going to know when you might need that. The next question that I get asked an awful lot is, isn't XLR better? And the answer is,
It
it depends.
depends. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, XLR is better in almost every sense of the word, in almost every sense of the way, given a couple things. One, that it's XLR on both ends. We would have no real benefit in coming from this XLR and plugging into these stereo jacks. In fact, we have a potential problem because we now have balanced driving unbalanced. That's not good. And the other thing is, we could say, well, we could go from these XLRs to these XLRs. That's true, and we'll get to that in a minute, though, because this is line level and this is mic level. So here's the takeaway. For this distance, which is probably 3 feet, 6 feet, whatever, unbalanced stereo is probably the preferable way to go.
Sure.
For me. I don't have to worry about any conversions of balanced, unbalanced, line mic. It is plug and play. I'm not really that worried about signal degradation or things over that distance. So that's what I would do. Now I do have balanced XLRs going out to my speakers, and I've got these aux outputs we talked about where I could say, well, I do have 3 auxes on this board, by the way, but maybe I'm going to send an aux to the videographer. Maybe I'm going to send an aux to the remote speakers, or maybe I'm going to send an aux to my sub.
Look at that. Magic.
Anyway, what will you do with your aux? It depends.
It's up to you.
Now let's look at a similar setup.
So Ben, you mentioned, of course, that it's coming out of the board that is a line level, and the XLR on the Personas in this situation is a mic level. Can you address that just a little bit? So for people who are confused about what the differences between those two.
Yes, I will. Let's hold that one for a bit.
We'll make a note.
If you're confused, stay tuned. We're going to come back to that because that brings us back to our mixing board on fire audio flamethrower graphic I could not find.
Oh man, where is my color crayon? Orange color crayon.
Well, so, I got a red annotation tool. I could just do
Oh, now we're on fire.
Yeah.
The girl is on fire.
How's that?
Yes.
All right. Let's look at another mixing board. So here we have one of those little digital boards that we talked about. Lots of options. I just happened to pick a UI12. No particular reason. So viewers don't read into that. And here again, we can say, well, I've got RCA outputs here, and I've got RCA inputs here. So I should just do that. And
Sure.
I probably would. And here again, I've got 2 aux outs. I've got my videographer, my remote speakers, main speakers coming out of the balanced XLRs, and my mics going into mic preamps. Now, if you're looking at this and you're saying, well, that looks a little bit funny, why doesn't this jack and this jack look the same? This one is really electrically the same. It has 3 little holes, just like our XLR. But it also has the ability to stick a 1/4 inch in the center. So I can plug my XLRs into those top 2, 1 and 2. And just as it happens to be, you'll notice the little graphic over the top there too. It has some additional processing that's only available on those 2 channels.
Okay.
So whether or not you want to use those 2 channels for microphones or for something else, it depends. Depends on if you want to use that processing on the guitar or something. Okay, now, so option 3 is I could also use the XLRs. So again, I think the preferential way here would be to stay line level unbalanced rather than going balanced line into mic, but you can. And we'll look at the what challenges that gives you, I think, here in a second, and then we'll see why you would or wouldn't do that.
Sure.
Questions on this before I close the screen?
I think we're good on that. I think I think we're good.
Okay. Are you ready for the flamethrower?
I think so.
All right. Now, notwithstanding the different types of connectors, which I think we should also dive into a little bit, we could have a little bit of fun with that. You know, the difference between RCA, quarter inch, XLR. But let's look at some audio levels real quick. And I worked hard on this graphic. I spent a few minutes in Excel to make it.
Sure.
So please appreciate that. What I've got on here is a combination of things. And I think if we just don't look at the whole screen at once and just kind of, we'll take a guided tour, that'll be easier. If you try to look at the whole screen at once, maybe this is going to be a little bit more of a heartache. But ultimately, what I want you to do is to think about your audio signal in voltage. It's just voltage. At the end of the day, it is just voltage. Whenever it's living inside of our equipment, it's just voltage. Outside of that, it's acoustic energy. Inside there, it's voltage. If it's digital, it's ones and zeros, but it's still got to be voltage to get converted to those. And so we've probably heard these expressions, you know, plus 4 dBu and minus 10 dBV. And astute people will notice right away that that U and that V are different. A U and a V are not the same, despite what the Romans are trying to tell you. You know, here we can see that, you know, plus 4 dBu and minus 10 dBV equate to different voltages, 1.228 volts RMS and, you know, 0.316. I think if we look, we can see that we can convert this. I can convert dBUs to dBVs, and I convert dBVs to dBUs, and there we can see what their value is. And there's a lot of funny numbers and ways to measure these things. But again, if we just think about it in terms of voltage, the chart that I made in Excel, I think summarizes it really, really well. Because these are both line level voltages that we're talking about here, and there's a variation you can see between those two, depending on, you know, we often hear it called pro and consumer. But down here, let's just look at some typical voltages and what they translate to. Basically, one line level is, you know, 1 dBV. It's 1 volt. 0 dBV, 1 volt, sorry. Anyway, you can see here that that is, so, you know, 1 volt is 1,000 millivolts, and our mic signal is between 1 and 10 millivolts, so I just split it down the middle and made it 5. And I think the takeaway is you can see how much more power here, how much more electromotive force in terms of voltage is being expressed in a line level signal versus a mic level signal. So if you have a mixer that is expecting a mic level signal, it's expecting that very small amount of voltage, and we give it this, that would be a problem.
Sure.
Now, usually your gear doesn't actually burst into flames, which is probably why there's a shortage of flaming mixing board pictures on the internet. But what we do have is a very crappy sounding signal, massively distorted because it simply cannot accurately reproduce that signal unless we turn it way down. And typically, you know, we're talking about this being expressed as like, you know, minus 40, you know, dBV. So,
okay, so tangent time here.
Yeah.
So we've got a mic level that's very, very low. You've got your line level that is there. Where does phono level? Because I've run into that on some of the, you know, since we've been talking turntables recently a little bit. Where does that fall into this? Does it fall? Is it closer to the mic? Is it closer to a line level, or is it something altogether different?
I don't actually know what the voltage of phono is. I do know that it's probably significantly lower. And it's funny because as old as I am, I should know, right? But because we have things called phono preamps,
Yeah.
Which is just like how we have mic preamps. And the purpose of a mic preamp is to bring this up to this. So that's why when I plug it into that XLR, that's my XLR. How'd I do? Pretty good, right?
Looks like a sad Halloween pumpkin.
All right, hush. So plug that into the mic preamp, and then my preamp pre-amplifies it up to line level. And there are phono preamps as well.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember.
Yeah,
What
I
photo
just remember,
voltage is.
there's been so much discussion about it. It's like, I've never thought about that, but if it's lower or higher, but yeah, and there's phono preamps in it, so it must be. Okay,
So if anybody knows, put it in the comments. If anybody's Googling it, put it in the
there
comments.
you go. We'll all learn together.
We talked about AI last week on the show. AI asked some great questions. AI probably knows that, but I don't know. Whatever. I'll get replaced by a machine soon. So.
It'd be great.
Hey, machines ain't unloading the trucks yet, so there's that.
And they're not eating the ice cream, which is the most important part.
Obviously.
For sure.
Happy to report that much ice cream was eaten over the last couple of weeks. But anyway, this is the key takeaway I wanted to illustrate here is why when we plug a line level signal into a mic level preamp, we have to be very careful. We've got to turn that sucker way down because again, it's minus 40, minus 60 dBV, is what we're expecting here. And because it's expecting to have a very low signal that it needs to boost back up to that.
Sure.
Typically, we use things like direct boxes and stuff that balance a signal and pad it down to mic level for that purpose. So you can plug in the line level XLR into your mixer's, mic level preamps, but you need to turn that stuff way down, which is why it's such a mismatch. I think for that short a distance, there's no real gain to do that. I think it's probably better to just go RCA or RCA to 1/4 inch and stay there. And then, down here we can see just some of the different ways of measuring this. You can see that dBu and dBV are both measures of voltage. dBm is measures of power in milliwatt. dBw is measures of power in watts. SPL, measures of sound in pascals. And then dB full space, that just represents the maximum signal possible in a digital circuit, which varies from circuit to circuit, which can be very frustrating because it's not a directly translatable or correlatable number. Any of these other numbers, we can calculate from the other basically,
Sure.
So
Steve mentions that the phono is very, very low voltage. Even I think it's lower than mic voltage. So yeah, it would be a very low voltage that needs to be pumped up.
So mic is between 1 and 10 milliamps. That's pretty low.
He's got
millivolts. I'm sorry, not
let's
milliamps.
see. So it's
millivolts.
tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 2 10,000ths to 7 thousandths of a volt.
Well, that would be 7 thousandths would be 7 milliamps. I keep saying milliamps. Viewers, I don't mean milliamps. Look, the show's free. You're not getting your money back. So millivolts. There's no milliamps here. Just forget about the milliamps.
It's a millivolt. So
you did not hear me say milliamps. Anyway, it's a millivolt. I'm struggling today. I'm sorry.
No, we're doing fine. We're doing fine.
So 7 thousandths of a volt would be 7 millivolts.
Okay.
So if it's in that 2 to 7, then it is pretty much exactly the same as mic level. So,
excellent.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for not being a robot.
That doesn't like ice cream. Steve likes ice cream.
Ice cream would make robots rust probably.
That would. That would. And then we could take over the world again.
Honestly, they're lost. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ain't scared. I
ain't scared. I know where the cord gets plugged in.
You know how many people mentioned the Terminator comment last week? That was hilarious. It's a couple people brought it up in conversation. They're like, "I saw Terminator. I ain't scared." I know how to deal with robots. All right.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
So we've established there's a huge difference. That's why we went with the RCAs. Now let's kind of talk about, because we've got RCAs, we have XLRs, we have a 1/4 inch with a variety of different options when it comes to the 1/4 inch type connections. And these all can be used to make those jumps from device to device.
Yeah, they can. So let's pull up a couple more pictures that I got here. Whip these out for you. So you should see a few connectors on your screen right now. And I'm going to change my annotation color. So what you can see is that as the arrows point, I stole this right out of one of my own presentations, so I'll plagiarize myself. So those of you who've been to some of my presentations, you may recognize this if you weren't asleep by this point. But you can see that this has a sleeve, and this has a sleeve, and this has a sleeve. And you can see that this has a tip, and this has a tip, and this has a tip. And you can see that only this one has a ring. So you love it, put a ring on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we count real quick, evoking the spirit of the count from Sesame Street, we can see that we've got 1, 2, 3 conductors in an XLR. Now XLR can have between 3 and 7, by the way, but in the audio XLR is 3, and we can see here I've got 3 conductors on my XLR. Look, like I said, it's a free show.
Exactly.
So
And if you don't get the, count reference,
if you don't get the count from Sesame Street, seriously, what? I mean,
yeah, well, again, we're talking to young guys, there's guys like Howie in there.
I think Sesame Street's still on.
So
It's
we
still on.
got to explain some of our old references to those young bucks like that once in a while.
All the Spanish I know I learned from Sesame Street, and believe me, it has saved my bacon a few times. Somebody actually thought I was a fluent speaker in Vegas until they found out that I was just repeating the phrase I knew. But anyways,
exactly.
I'm working on it, though. I'm trying to get better. All right. So down here, we can see that these only have 2, and this one has 3, like our XLRs. So therein lies kind of the conundrum. If I'm trying to plug this into this, what do I do with the extra pin that I have? We have to deal with that somehow. And that's a different show, because that, honestly, that's a career. People like, Neil Muncy and Henry Ott have made careers out of writing and studying this sort of thing about, what to do with the pin 1 problem, so to speak. But the short answer, well, no, I'm not, we got a graphic for the short answer. Short answer is, it's better if we don't have to deal with it.
Right. Yep.
And in this case, we don't. We've got connections on both sides of the mixer that match. Okay, so let's take a look at this. And we're going to have pop quiz. I don't know how fast people can do the comments.
We get about a 20-second delay. So 20
Okay,
30,
well,
30 seconds.
so John, I'll just put you on the spot.
Yeah.
So viewers, watch John squirm. This is going to be great.
It'll be fun.
It's going to be awesome.
Oh, look at the time. We're out of time.
Time's up.
Show's over.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Not so
Next.
fast.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You know who my other favorite Sesame Street character is?
Oscar the Grouch.
You nailed it. So here we go. All right. So I'm coming for you. All right. Trash.
Okay, I got to pull the image. Got to get it on the front of there, so I can't follow chat for a few minutes because I'm focusing.
That's all right. You don't want to see what they're going to say
One of
anyway.
these things is not like the other.
You got it. We're going to toast you here. So, all right. So, John. Pop quiz. First connector. This one right here.
Yes.
Mono or stereo?
It's mono.
It's mono, he says.
Yes.
And he is right. Good job. Next connector. Mono or stereo?
This one is it depends on how it is wired.
Oh, you're too good, John. Gosh dang it. Yes, you're right.
But because there's a reflection behind there, I can see that was wired stereo. No, wait, I can't see that. Sorry.
So what about this one?
Yeah, exactly. That's just confusion, and it makes me frustrated. Actually, the part that makes me frustrated is that if you are using wires and you're not familiar with how they're put together, you have no idea. They look like they could be stereo, but maybe they're not wired properly.
Bingo. 100%, John. And a good way to tell without opening your wire, by the way, is to have one of our handy Mote cable testers from Mental Effects, because it will tell you
Exactly what you
So
want to know.
even if you don't think your cable's bad, you just might be nice to know how it's wired. All right, so let's get to the punchline for all this, and let me show you how John is correct. And by the way, thanks for ruining my fun, John. I was really hoping you were going to screw this up so we could just, but doggone it, you're too smart. So
Sorry.
yeah, that's all right. So here you can see the answer. John is correct. First connector is mono. It has a signal positive, and then it has a signal negative and ground shared on the sleeve because it is an unbalanced connection.
Mm-hmm.
Most people say when I give these presentations that this connector is stereo. because that's the context in which they're familiar with it, like a headphone.
Yeah, very much so.
But in this case, this is not stereo. This is also mono balanced. So we have our signal positive, our signal negative on the ring, and then our signal ground separate from the signal ground, unlike the unbalanced. See the difference here? And that's why this signal is mono. So
now, Ben, hang on. Is that is the positive, negative, and ground, is that consistent as the pin 1, pin 2, pin 3 is on our XLR? Are those kind of industry that's always like that when it is a balanced run like that?
It's supposed to be.
Okay.
Yes. That's more or less resolved. And I was laughing because I had mentioned Neil Muncie earlier. And like I said, literally back in the 70s, Neil made a career out of trying to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, if you look at old gear, now younger viewers, here's a little history lesson for you. And I'm embarrassed to say that me and John are old enough to have actually seen this in real life. But if you looked at an older piece of gear, it would say pin 2 hot or pin 3 hot. It would specify because there was not a prevailing standard. And thanks to our friends at the AES, that got resolved, and pin 1 more or less got resolved. So short answer, TLDR, is yes, it should always be standard tip ring sleeve, and how it mates to the numerical assignment on the XLR. Those connectors are numbered. So what we should see is this would be 2, that's a 2, this would be 3, and that would be 1 on our XLR. Now, excuse me, as we can see, this 1/4 inch TRS tip ring sleeve can also be stereo and is now a stereo unbalanced. We have a common signal negative, which shares the ground just as it does over here because it is an unbalanced signal, just like this one. But it now has a left and a right, which is like our headphones. They share a ground, they share a common, and then they have left and right signal positives, unlike our mono balanced. By the way, quick punchline, if you take a if you take a mono balanced and you plug it into a stereo unbalanced connection, it's going to sound freakishly weird.
And that was where I was just going to go. So on our board, you showed us where there were stereo 1/4 inch inputs.
Yep.
And if we would do that, we would be hearing Yoda sings the blues, but played backwards on our turntable.
Kind of like that, yeah. Because again, those jacks are their dual TS. I don't have my annotation tool up, sorry. On the board are 2 of these. So it's expecting a left and a right individually, not combined. And in essence, what we'd be, plugging in, if we plugged in a TRS stereo, is now we've got kind of a problem here. Right?
Sure.
So it's in fact, you can sort of do this on purpose in some, music software by trying to, take things out of phase for cancellation, whatever, eliminating, lyrics, whatever, but because they're typically pan center. Anyway, bottom line, it's going to sound thin and weird and not right, and this is why. So important to stick the right thing in the right place.
Boy, words to live by.
Since I'm already in trouble with my wife, I'll just say...
I was thinking fork in an outlet, but hey, wherever you're going, man.
Listen, man, DJs are our primary audience here. I think they're going to follow this example. So I think they're going to see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, they're not taking a fork to the outlet. Okay, fine.
Just because it fits in a hole doesn't mean you should put it there.
Okay. Life lessons from Ben Stowe.
Talking about audio jacks, but it probably translates to other things too. So,
Possibly.
Forks and outlets, for example.
So there's occasionally times where you have wires and they have done a Y and splitters and such. Short of having a moat type of a device to be able to tell what these are, I mean, how would you tell how they've wired them without a moat?
Well, that's a good question, because you're right. There's a lot of different ways you can wire a Y cable, and of course we have people that request custom cables, and they probably get irritated sometimes when we ask, "Well, what are you doing with it?" Well, we're trying to
Hmm.
save, and then they're like, "Well, just wire me a Y cable." Oh, if only it was that simple. We have a booklet of wiring combinations, and I think some people don't understand. Like, when we hire a new customer service person who maybe comes from outside the industry, they're like, "Well, how come they don't know what they're talking about?" They're not electrical engineers; they're customer service people. They can tell you where your order's at, but that's why we have engineers, right?
Hmm.
So to answer the question, and by the way, we do try to teach our customer service people these things, but there is a learning curve, right? So you could use a continuity tester on a multimeter. You could open the shells of the connectors if they're not molded, if you can open them, and they're not heat shrunk inside or something, but those are probably some of the, I mean, yeah, I guess you could plug it in, and if it doesn't sound right, it probably not right,
Hmm.
but those would be the couple of quick things that would come to my mind.
And I mean,
But
ultimately, the best way to handle it, because there have been times where I've gone to a venue and they're like, "Hey, plug into this so it can put ceremony outside," and it's like, okay, it's a 1/4 inch jack, it's a tip ring sleeve, and it's like,
mhm.
okay, well, what do I did, and it would be nice to know. So having a moat to be able to test and see what kind of that wire is and what it's going would be beneficial.
Well, that's just it. I mean, yeah, we're talking, a mode is $69 and includes a case and some, test probes. And I mean, I know money doesn't grow on trees, and I know that's not chump change to for some folks. And you're talking to a guy whose career started out making coffee can lights,
Hmm.
but honestly, compared to the price of every other piece of DJ gear, I mean,
Yeah,
you,
it's
you gotta have a moat. So that's obviously I'm biased. I'm also a guy who owns about every tester known to man because I think they were pretty cool.
yeah.
But
We got a question that came in. Superfly was wondering because he performs in a variety of different clubs around the state and around the country, and sometimes the DJ controller is in one space and it's a long run to the actual mixer for the club. When you get into a longer run, then how would you recommend them being able to go from a controller to that mixer, which is probably very similar to a band mixer or the mixer that we were showing earlier?
well, now we're talking something different because unbalanced connectors, because they share that signal ground and that signal minus, we don't want to run those a very long distance. 10 feet's kind of my max. I mean, you can go a little longer, it's not the end of the world, but 10 feet's kind of my max. Uh, Good, solid, balanced XLR, NLFX Platinum Series, you can go, our maximum recommended run length is 800 feet. So, pretty big difference there. So I would say definitely do it with a balanced signal. Definitely do it, over XLR, good quality XLR. Now, here again, we can do it with that voltage mismatch and say, well, I'm going to push this line level signal, into my mixer, and then I'm going to have to, pad it down and turn down my preamp, and that's okay. Maybe a better way to do it, or certainly how we would do it on a stage, is I would put a direct box, a stereo DI, which is going to balance that signal and pad it down to mic level, and also provide things like ground lift and stuff to get rid of any hum or buzz. So that's how I would do it.
And you would have that DI, then you would run from the controller, we'd take the two XLR outs, we'd run the wire over, and then we'd have the DI, stereo DI. So we'd plug into that near the main mixer and then run probably, I'm guessing, an 1/8 inch stereo out of the DI box into the 1/8 inch stereo input on the mixer. Or what?
Backwards. Got that backwards. Let me do a whiteboard for you.
Okay.
So, all right, new whiteboard. Open and collaborate. Here we go. You get narration on the Zoom. You have to tell me when you can
Yep,
see
we can
what's
see the
going on.
whiteboard. Yep.
Okay, so say this is my DJ controller.
Mm-hmm.
DJ.
Kind of looking like a Roland one. It's a little more boxy than the other one.
That better?
There we go. Now it's looking definitely much more like our Pioneer.
What do you got against Roland?
Actually, I own them, or own one, so I'm good.
Yeah, no, I know you do. So I was like, what do you got against Roland?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's see. This is my DI.
DI box, yeah.
Yep. I was looking for a way to make it green because the Radial Pro AV2 is green. So, but anyway, so here I'm going to do my RCAs
Oh, okay.
because those I want to keep short, right? So this is my short distance. And then from here, I can run XLR. Oops. That cable didn't exist. Never mind that.
There you go. That was our spare wire in case we needed it, which we did not need it because all the wires were NLFX wires, so we knew they would work the first time.
That's right, but we always carry spares.
But we always carry spares because we're responsible.
So, here we're talking, 10 feet or less. And here we can go up to 800 feet. Typical stage snake might be 300 feet even, So,
and then those
we're not
XLRs,
really that worried about it.
and then those would go into a mic level input on the board?
Correct, because this DI does three things. Having a lot of fun with this whiteboard. I really need to play with these more often. So
Oh, you're getting there.
Whoa, look at that. How you doing? Oh. Okay, no longer having fun with the whiteboard.
We were doing so well until
I was. Stop. There we go. It's going to balance the signal. It's going to pad the signal, and it's going to lift the ground. Potentially, if we need it to. So
there we go.
Yeah. So that's why the DI does all kinds of things. So this comes in as line level, comes out as mic level, comes in as unbalanced, comes out as balanced. And if we have a ground voltage potential difference between these two mixers and we have a buzz or a hum, I push the button and it goes away.
Excellent. Good. I'm glad we were able to sketch that out because that was definitely helpful.
Yeah, me too. And I'm no longer having fun with whiteboard.
Yeah. No, wonderful. And Superfly, thank you for that because, yeah, good stuff. So, Ben, our time is up, and we've got Howie and the crew getting ready to go in the chill room here next. They are going to be out at djntv.com/chill. You guys can pop out there. I just put the link up in the chat so they can jump out to that. Next week we will be back again on Tuesday night, and we've got another topic for you. And then we'll have to figure the week out after. We're not sure exactly what Ben's schedule is going to be, so we'll be back again to talk gear and fun stuff, and it should be fabulous.
We strive for fabulous.
We do. We strive for fabulous, and then the snow's going to melt, and then we'll be like outside doing campfire shows. It'll be great.
We've never actually done a campfire.
We've talked about it.
Yeah, I think it needs to happen. Viewers, we rise up and let your voices be heard. We need to do a campfire show.
I mean,
mostly because I just want to be around a campfire.
Technically, it's almost been 10 years that we've been doing this show because it was, I think, 2014 we did our first. So we're like in year 9 now of doing this. So we've got to get a campfire show in before we hit 10 years. It's just got to be, or they'll probably want us to do the campfire show on the anniversary, which is early February of 2020.
I mean, whatever. Yeah.
We're hardy Minnesotans. We can be out there.
You believe this is the 10th anniversary of the Lighting and Audio Symposium too?
It's amazing how it doesn't.
10th anniversary.
It doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
Time.
10 sounds like a good, nice round number.
It does. It sounds like but I don't know how that happens. I mean, we're only like 25 years old, so I mean, we must have been started really early.
Started young, but I can tell you before COVID, this wasn't great.
Yeah, so. Exactly. We're teenagers, one or the other.
I'm gonna just shave this off. I just don't like. I don't know. Just lazy. I guess.
But we've got that cold temps in northern Minnesota, so another 2 months, and then you'll be able to shave it off.
Then I'll have to shave it.
Yeah, because we'll go to
this summer. I don't know. It gets so hot.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being with us tonight. To Howie and the crew, djntv.com/chill. Brian and Jay and John will be in there talking music tonight and have some fun with them. We'll catch you next week. Good night, everybody.